Hi, I'm Barry Dutter, and this is The Takeaway. This week on The Takeaway, we'll be looking at The Mummy, which is the first film in Universal Studios' new Dark Universe. This is their big reboot of all their classic horror movie franchises, all together in one universe. This is the one that's the kickoff, that starts it all. This is the one that gets the ball rolling. This movie's got to get you so stoked that you're super excited about getting a new Dark Universe movie every year for the rest of your life. Let's see how well they did. Alright, my first takeaway from The Mummy was this. Starting a new shared universe is hard. Yeah, it's really hard. You know, if you had all the classic Universal monsters and you had the chance to reboot them and start them in a new movie, how would you start? How do you start? Well, I think usually you want to start with the big guns. You want to start with your top characters. Like if you're doing an Avengers movie, you got to get Cap, Thor, and Iron Man in there, of course. The big three, as we used to call them. If you're doing a Justice League movie, you got to get Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman in there. Even if Superman is dead, you still put him in the movie. He's got to be. That's the Trinity. That's the DC Comics Trinity right there. And if you're doing a Universal horror franchise, you got to get the big three in there. Frankenstein, Dracula, and the Wolfman. That's right. Drac, Frankie, and Wolfie. The Drac Pack. The Monster Squad. You got to get those three. You ask anybody to name their favorite Universal monsters, yes, some of them might say Creature from the Black Lagoon. Okay, I might give you that one. But basically, these are the big three. These are the scariest ones. These are the ones everybody talks about time and again. These are the most iconic characters. None of these characters are in the film. Instead, we get The Mummy. Yeah, that's right. A guy who wraps up in bandages and walks around going, I mean, Mummy was never scary. It's just not a scary character. I get why they went with The Mummy first. They already have the ride at Universal Studios. It's good promotion. They did have a couple of huge Mummy movies about 10 years or so ago with Brendan Fraser. Those were big hits. So yeah, I guess from an economic standpoint it made sense to start with The Mummy, but let's face it, The Mummy is a boring character. Now, the other takeaway, the next takeaway I have is that death is meaningless in this film. This movie has maybe 5 main characters. 4 of them die and come back in the same movie. Death means absolutely nothing. Tom Cruise is in a plane crash. This brutal, vicious, explosive plane crash. Comes out without a scratch on him. He's alive. We find out later, I mean, the Mummy clearly caused the plane crash by, causing a swarm of birds to fly into the engines of the plane. So she crashed the plane near an excavation site where she knew the sacred sword that she was looking for. I'm sorry, the knife was buried. So she causes the plane crash. She causes Tom Cruise's character to die, and then just brings him back like that. It brings up the question of how many times can she do that? For most of the movie, she's sending random, undead legions after Cruise. She sends a swarm of rats, and just all the different types of creatures are attacking. There's a sandstorm. But we never feel that Cruise is in any danger ever. We already know that no matter what happens to him, she can just bring him back. She has the ability. So why are we supposed to care? That's the tricky part. Now, here's an interesting one. If you are a screenwriter and you can't figure out what to have your characters say to each other, just have them shout out each other's names over and over again. In this movie, Tom Cruise plays a character named Nick. And the reason we know this is because the female lead shouts out his name about 500 times in the movie. Nick, 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 Nick. It's like a virtual Nick fest. It calls to mind other classic name-shouting movies like Back to the Future. Doc! Marty! Doc! Marty! Doc! Marty! And then, of course, there was the all-time champion, Titanic. Jack! Rose! Jack! Rose! Jack! Rose! We already know their names. You don't have to have them shouting out each other's names all the time. Next, my next takeaway from the film, the Mummy is not the only monster in this movie. There is another monster. It's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Yeah, both played by Russell Crowe. Now, initially, we meet Dr. Jekyll, who is refined and very sophisticated, and he's quite the cultured man of letters. And then we meet Mr. Hyde, which is Russell Crowe with his hair slightly messed up and contact lenses. That's it. That's all we get. We get a slightly scruffier Russell Crowe as Mr. Hyde. I have to admit, I was disappointed by Mr. Hyde. He doesn't really seem to get much bigger. He just gets a little meaner. He has a fight scene. Mr. Hyde fights Tom Cruise, who is like a 5'6" guy, and Mr. Hyde has a hard time. Can barely even beat it. Can barely hold his own against a Like, if you could transform into a monster and you still can't beat up a little 5'6" shrimp, what's the point of being a monster? What was the point of injecting yourself with the serum? I don't get that. Remember League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, the movie where they had a Mr. Hyde in there, who was this big, hulking monster? He was so big they couldn't even fit him in the frame. He was 20 feet tall. I was kind of thinking we would see something like that, not like Russell Crowe. Look, my hair's messed up now. How do you like me now? Monstrous, aren't I? Not so much. My next takeaway in this film, Tom Cruise is Maverick. In this film, Cruise tries hard to bring a lighthearted persona to this role. He tries to inject some humor, but the script is so poorly written, it really doesn't make a lot of sense. He's kind of like basically playing his sort of cocky Tom Cruise character. He's kind of like, oh, look at me, I'm like an aging action hero. I'm in a movie with a mummy. I gotta fight a mummy? Really? Come on, what's going on? I'm 53 years old. This is what I gotta do? I mean, he tries. He tries. The most interesting thing about the film, and my biggest takeaway, is that the Mummy makes us miss Brendan Fraser, who would have brought more warmth and more humor to the part. Cruise tries. He makes an effort. I'm not going to say he doesn't try, but he's not really given much material to work with. By the end of the film, spoiler alert, Cruise now has the power over life and death. He has become a monster himself, which means they can bring him back for any future movie in the Dark Universe. Any character who dies, Tom Cruise can snap his fingers and bring the character back to life. Death as meaningless in this movie, in this universe, actually. Talk about a Deus Ex Machina, or as I like to call it, a Cruise Ex Machina. Do you see what I did there? So, all in all, the Dark Universe is off to a bad start. The next two films in the series will be The Invisible Man with Johnny Depp and Bride of Frankenstein. We're skipping Frankenstein, going right to The Bride. Interesting choices, Universal. Very interesting. Yeah, bad start for Dark Universe, but we'll see what comes next. Till next time, I'm Barry Dutter. We'll see you next time on The Takeaway. Bye-bye.